Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I hope you find time to click around a little bit. Give us some thumbs up, maybe, stuff like that. Hope everybody's doing well. We got a big fire down in the United Kingdom at the nuclear submarine production facility. It's interesting because they can make them, but they can't decommission them. Got a couple of quick stories to get through before we get to that stuff. It's a significant fire. Slovenia cancels a referendum on nuclear plants. And Canada had done the same thing for a referendum. And Slovenia done the same thing for their referendum. Because the population is too stupid to make a decision, they said. Slovenian lawmakers on Thursday voted to cancel a referendum on building a new nuclear plant after environmental groups and experts filed complaints questioning its legality at the Constitutional Court. So they cancelled the referendum. They're just going to vote themselves, right? And environmental groups and experts. 69 MPs in the 90-seat parliament voted to cancel a public referendum. One was against that, and one abstained from voting. The referendum has been due to take place on November 24th, just in a few weeks. So it matters because when Japan's nuclear plants had an event, nuclear meltdowns, Tokyo Vice Governor suggested a Fukushima draft, but didn't have a referendum for that. And there was also talk about 16 olders should be prepared to die at the plant. So when your power plant goes bad, the repercussions are pretty incredible, right? So why wouldn't you have a referendum? Are they going to... Clearly, they know they would have lost the plant. So the nuclear industry stepped in and said, well, get rid of the referendum. Earlier this month, Slovenia's parliament decided to call a referendum with the question, do you support the implementation of a new nuclear plant, which together with other low-carbon sources, so they're suggesting that nuclear somehow is low-carbon. Remember, all nuclear power plants need 2 gas, oil, coal plants just to operate. They can't run on their own power, right? But public criticisms about the question, do you support the implementation of a new nuclear plant? I mean, every nuclear power plant needs 2 dedicated, large, massive external power supplies, gas, oil, and coal plants. Typically coal because it's the cheaper for nuclear, makes nuclear look good. So when the power plant breaks down, like if your gas plant breaks down, your coal plant breaks down, your oil plant breaks down, geothermal, whatever, you're not going to see headlines where 7 people died on a shopping street. They died because of radioactive fallout long after the accident, right? Imagine 7 people. So they want you to think it's like walking in sunshine and that it's like bananas and it's like the sunshine and everything else, right? But it's not. Japan picked up 30 million one-ton bags of topsoil that is incredibly radioactive. Now that everybody stopped paying attention, they're cutting it open and growing food in it. And that to suggest that nuclear is low carbon is quite insane, really, because gas, oil, and coal plants don't poison your water for millions of square kilometers. And that the process of just getting the uranium is like it's a small amount when it's finally said and done, But the process is not small. The whole process is insane. And then the waste is typically put into the ground or dumped into the ocean for decades. And you end up with this in your water tables that destroys the entire ecosystem eventually. That all nuclear power, nuclear mines, the mining part of it, these ponds are chemical ponds. They're allowed to evaporate into the environment. These are harsh chemicals. And remember, when you have a nuclear accident, you have to abandon your cities and your communities and your country and your legacies and your heritage. And to suggest that nuclear, which uses the most sophisticated equipment, is somehow carbon-free, and that the whole process is the most resource-intensive process in history. And so they like to tell you one thing, but the reality is quite different, and it's quite scary, and it's appropriately should be questioned, and there should have been a referendum. And the project led the parliamentary group to withdraw their support for the referendum. The project, like, the experts were questioning it. They wanted to, and so they didn't have a referendum because they were afraid they wouldn't win the referendum. That's not it's no longer a country. Think about this statement here. Send us people who don't mind dying. Have you ever seen that kind of headline for a gas plant, an oil plant, a coal plant, a geothermal, windmills or anything else? No, of course not. You never will. Lawmakers says there was valid doubts about whether voters can make an informed, autonomous, and responsible decision on such an issue. Yeah, because they've been lied to for the entire legacy of nuclear. They've been told it's like a banana and a potato chip, and that's like walking in sunshine. It's like walking in sunshine. It's like bananas. And so they don't understand. And then, therefore, they're going to be punished because you lied to them for their whole legacy? That only the government itself, the lawmakers, are smart enough to make that decision. Their decision obviously is going to be nuclear. You, like, really, where's your values? The president said, I am personally satisfied that there will be no referendum. That you have no voice. That makes him satisfied. Did the country elect him for that particular for that routine? Does anybody really think that that's how that works, or should work, or did work, or could work? The government said it will work on the preparation of a special law and that the state-owned company will continue working on the development of the project, which has been estimated to cost between 10 billion and 15 billion euros. Now, whenever they give you an estimate, of course, you can expect it to double and triple. You can count on them to destroy your future. That's all you can count on these people to do. Yeah, let's. So the U.S. power grid just added this, and we're going to get to the submarines here in a second. at the site. U.S. power grid added battery equivalents of 20 nuclear reactors in the past 4 years. Like, why would you use batteries, though? Like, in all honesty, why in the goodness gracious would you use batteries? And that the pace of the growth helps maintain renewable energies when weather conditions interfere with wind and solar. But there's so many better solutions than batteries. Why would you use batteries? I'll show them to you coming up. Why are you showing dead trees and power lines? From barely anything just a few years ago, the U.S. is now adding utility-scale batteries at a dizzying pace, having installed more than 20 gigawatts of battery capacity to the electric grid, with 5 gigawatts occurring in just the first 7 months of this year. So 5 gigawatts this year already, or the first 7 months. It's an incredible statement. This means the battery storage equivalent to the output of 20 nuclear reactors is bolted onto the American electric grid in barely 4 years. With the capacity about to double to 40 gigawatts by 2025. So they're going to add another 20 gigawatts in the next 12 months of batteries. But why batteries? This changes the whole paradigm of producing electricity, delivering it, consuming it, and storage. There's many solutions for storage. Why would you use batteries? It's like literally the worst solution. The 20 billion, the money that they spent to get 20 gigawatts would have probably given 60 gigawatts of geothermal. Batteries can smooth out some of the variabilities from those times when the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining. But if you use geothermal and then backed it up with wind and solar, you have the perfect setup, right? The world beyond on almost every policy required to cut carbon emissions. Without carbon, you can't have trees or plants. Trying to blame global warming on carbon. It's like trying to blame you not passing your driver's test because you had the hiccups when you were 6 years old. Countries are falling behind on almost every policy required to cut greenhouse gas emissions despite progress on renewable energies. There's going to be around 660 gigawatts of solar in the 12 months of 2024. 660 gigawatts. But you can do what they call water batteries, where you build two reservoirs and you pump water up to the top one. Excess energy with renewables, right? And then you got enough water to go for 3, 4, 5 days without any sun or any wind. Pumped hydro could deliver 100% renewable electricity. They identified over 500,000 natural places worldwide. And all you really want to do is just pump water up to a reservoir, and when the sun ain't shining, the wind ain't blowing, because you do that with extra energy you got, right? And one of the most impressive ones, there's many other ones besides these, by the way, startup pumped for compressed air wind storage. So these windmills, all they do is compress air. They're designed to do that. And so you can store it in just mine shafts, which is very easy to build, right? It's around 120 psi. And then you create a lot of heat doing this. And so you harvest the heat and you put it in lava rocks or sand where it can hold 700 degrees for months at a time. Not that you're going to need to hold it that long. And so when you want to uncompress the air that is compressed to make it expand faster, you already have that heat that you harvest sitting there. It's very efficient, right? Lava rocks, right? The rocks from where the earth, like where where the lava is coming out of the ground, like you see in Iceland and stuff like that, those rocks can hold 3,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures for extended periods of time, over and over and over and over, almost indefinitely. And so you can store heat in stuff like that. But sand has been shown to do the same attributes, which is really interesting. All right, this is a big story today. Thick smoke as fire breaks out of UK nuclear sub shipyard. So they got I think it's 19 or 20 nuclear subs that are basically abandoned in the United Kingdom. And 2 years ago, the story came out, they were thinking about taking them out and sinking them in the Atlantic. So they got a lot of smoke coming out, a thick smoke. They're telling people, it's hard to comprehend that people would live next door to these facilities. The Barrow-in-Furness. They got some interesting names over there, don't they? And you got to have a thick accent just to say it. So this is a significant fire in one of the biggest buildings in Europe. I think it's the second or third biggest building in Europe. Well, if it stops them from building nuclear subs, that would be a win, wouldn't it? And that the smoke coming out of there is very toxic. This is very clear. It's super toxic. But they're very quiet on what's going on. We'll just go through the stories that came out. The smoke, it's hard to appreciate how big these buildings are. 2 people went to the hospital. There's around 200 people working there. And the police, not academics or scientists, thank goodness, I suppose. But the police are telling everybody just to close your windows, stay in your house, you shut up. Don't worry about it. It's the government. They can do whatever they want. If you get sick and die later, then you were a perfect slave, right? Fire rages at nuclear submarine shipyard in Britain. 2 hospitalized. 150-year-old idiot place. 220 miles northwest of London. Like that whole coastline is polluted from the emissions from this site. And it's not nuclear we're talking about. We're just talking about the unmitigated chemicals that they have dumped in this area before there was any regulations, for instance. And that the nuclear subs they produced over the years are it's absurd, the accidents that they had with these things. And then if you look at we used to cover it's hard to find the information sometimes, but we used to cover the Freedom of Informations about the nuclear sites in the United Kingdom years ago. And they would have like 600 accidents a year or something, and just to cover it all up. And then some people would submit Freedom of Information Acts and get access to a certain amount of it. It was terrifying. This is a really interesting statement, right? Fire rages at a nuclear submarine shipyard. Now, typically, now don't quote me on this, but we're not, as far as I know, we're not talking about nuclear. We're not talking about a nuclear radioactive emissions. That don't mean it's not happening. That don't mean I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. But my understanding is, like, when you're building a ship, there's no reason to have a nuclear in those particular buildings. I don't know 100%, right? Did it affect anything else? Were they storing anything on this site? Some of those equipment might have nuclear material in it. We don't have any idea of what's going on. We really don't know any details. The one thing they're good at is telling you nothing. We know there is absurd toxic chemicals involved in this. And it's interesting when they come out, there is no nuclear risk. Well, the police are not quantified or qualified to make an assessment like that, are they? Video shared on social media overnight showed flames shooting out while alarms blared. And one of the locals were saying when we opened the front door, we saw a lot of black smoke. You should never live near these disease factories. It was very loud, which meant that it was raging. Because this is a massive building, who really knows what's going on? Because like when they're building it, it's not likely they're going to have nuclear weapons or anything at that's going to be loaded separately. The nuclear reactors that they're putting there, that could be burning, right? That there could be nuclear reactors in these submarines. I'm not sure if they load that after or if they're loading that. I know they're not close to it, finishing the submarines that they got there. So it's not likely that there is a nuclear reactor loaded. That don't mean that I'm right, of course, right? There very well could be. And we're just going to have to follow the story. We're still early in this story. And the British nuclear industry are probably some of the worst people conceivable. We've covered thousands and thousands of stories on these creatures over the years. I'd be very cautious in suggesting there is no nuclear risk because these are nuclear submarines. They're run by nuclear reactors. And so I don't know for sure how close any of them were to completion. There could be one there that's ready with a nuclear reactor in it. I don't know if they would load it there in that building itself. I simply don't know. And so I can't say, unfortunately. It's a significant fire, very loud. When you talk about very loud, where they manufacture nuclear submarines. So I don't know, unfortunately. And we're not getting any information. There was no nuclear risk despite the fire being significant. So hopefully it sets them back 100 years. 2 people were taken to the hospital for suspected smoke. When you say suspected, and I don't like smoke inhalation. They advise people living nearby to remain indoors while emergency services respond to the incidents and keep the windows and doors closed. People living nearby. For goodness sakes, don't live near these disease factories. Police, no nuclear risk. How are the police supposed to assess that? Which, see, that makes me suspicious that instead of having somebody from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission coming out and making the assertion, which you still can't trust, you got police saying it, and police they're not nuclear scientists, nuclear academics, or anything else. And so the Colombian constabulary, again, these are not the people that should be talking about nuclear. Nuclear is a very complicated subject. We don't know, right? So it's very suspect that they're not using the proper authorities to make those assertions, right? The constabulary told the local victims to stay inside and close their windows and doors. That's not going to protect you from these chemical plumes. Say it's just chemical plumes. Closing your doors and windows is not going to protect you from that. Or your children, or your aunt or uncle, or your grandparents, or yourselves, or your pets. And this contaminant, it'll land on everything. Let's just say it's a lot of chemicals, right? That's very toxic. Chemicals we're talking about they would have used. And so I really don't know. And we're not getting no information coming out. Hi, everybody. Oh, we got a poll tonight. Let's get back after that. Would humanity be healthier if nuclear industry was never contaminated? All of our food and water has never. So the nuclear industry has contaminated all food, all water on the entire planet. Everything is contaminated by the nuclear industry. All right, so this is insane stories we got coming up. The mayor, whose dad was the guy who originally brought in the Nuclear Waste Management Organization 20 years ago. His son is now the mayor. The mayor didn't expect a tight result in Ontario community vote to host a nuclear waste site. So there's two parts of this story, right? There's the communities in Ontario, Canada, where they're going to build, allegedly, they want to build a deep geological repository. And the community voted 51 to 49%. 51 to 49%. The other community didn't have a referendum because the politician says the people didn't want a referendum. And so they voted and accepted to have a nuclear waste site put in their prime farmland. A Nuclear Waste Management Organization's senior transportation engineer explained transportation signage for waste uranium during a tour of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's facility. Again, there's no dissenting voices. They blocked me and censored the daylights out of me. As you can see tonight, because we're talking about it, I'm censored heavily again. 14 viewers, 14 likes, 14 votes, 30 minutes into the show that I've been doing for over a decade. Any dissenting voices are immediately ostracized from humanity. These are cowards, right? And what they've done was probably the most cowardly thing imaginable, but they still got to get the consent of the native communities. And this is why they're going to censor me, because this is what morons and monsters do, right? Residents of the Ontario, Canada municipality voted in favour of hosting a deep geological repository for Canada's nuclear waste in an extremely tight referendum. But the other community had no referendum because the town council, this is only a small community by the way, the town council said that the population didn't want a referendum. They were too lazy to vote on something that will affect their children and themselves for many, many generations in a catastrophic way. And now the mayor says it's time to heal the community fractures over the issue. The vote was 51 to 49%. And the mayor, who's in tight with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Canada, it's time to heal the community fractures over the issues. Like, who is this creature? What kind of despicable creature would talk like that? And this is the son of the mayor that invited the Nuclear Waste Management Organization there 20 years ago. And they've been fighting for 20 years in the single communities, a couple of communities, right? In the middle of nowhere. Beautiful place. It's over 7,000 lakes. 7,000 lakes. And the Great Lakes are right there too, which is the third biggest body of freshwater aquifer on the entire planet. And this mayor, of course, everybody knew he was going to do everything he can to get the Nuclear Waste Management Organization contract because his dad set it up. And how did he get elected, I wonder? Of this little community. Because the Nuclear Waste Management Organization was in tight for 20 years with this community, embedded, entrenched in this community. And is the reason the community is divided / fractured. The municipalities of South Bruce, located south of Owen Sound, put the question to its residents, and the results released late yesterday, or Monday, showed they voted 51% in favour. 51% in favor. And they never had a single dissenting, sensible voice. Not one. There was some groups that are set up, but from the information I see them putting out for the last couple of years, they don't understand nuclear. They know it's bad, but they're not able to articulate it. And that if I wasn't ostracized for the last number of years, I would have been up there and would have informed the population. We would have had presentations in the communities, and there was zero possibility that vote would have went through. But they still got to win over the native community. So I'm going to head up there next spring, and I'm going to go to all the native communities and do presentations, every friggin' one of them. So the results show the need for a municipality to move forward. Like, they should have to redo the vote when it's that close, shouldn't they? It's time now to accept the results, says the traitor, the human trash, the mayor. For the community to start rebuilding itself and bonding together again. They've been divided for 20 years. Mending those fences, so to speak, the scumbag said. The scumbag mayor said he did not expect the vote to be that close. It wasn't. It was most likely voted down, and they just went, well, it's all digital. Let's change that to 51% in the favor. That's exactly what happened, I can guarantee you. And the results were binding on council as long as there was at least a 50% voter turnout, and 70% of the residents cast a ballot. It's a very small population, only a couple thousand people, right? And they're going to put it right in the middle of prime farmland, which is for hundreds of square miles of farmland. They're going to bring the waste there, and then they got to repackage it. So all the farmlands on the highways, on both sides of the highways, all the way there are going to be contaminated for 170 years of emissions. And then also the site itself will be repackaged, which means everything is vented. The results are 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 the results. And it's what the municipality has to live with now. The mayor said well, no, it's a 51% vote shouldn't be binding. It shouldn't be a digital. It should be a paper ballot during a little fucking community in the middle of nowhere. Why would you trust these scumbags who lied to you for their entire legacy with something that is going to impact your health and your children's health and your loved ones' health forever? Why would you do that? And why would you have the exclusive say on something that affects all Canadians? Like, being evil is so natural for these people. They'll destroy humanity so that they can get themselves a color TV, these people. And Bill Knoll, vice chair to Protect Our Waterways, which is opposed to the repository, said that 51% is hardly a resounding yes. This is 100% right to say that. And not in the spirit of compelling demonstrations of willingness. And the word willingness was injected in there because they had this company show up, and it was going around harassing everybody. They called it a poll, but they were going around harassing everybody, and they were calling it a willingness. A willingness instead of, like, it was so made up. It's just shocking the contempt that they have for those communities. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization has said it wants to see before selecting a site. It said the community had to want it. And 51% of the votes is not the community demonstrating that. It's not a resounding yes at all. And because it's a digital vote, who's to say that the people with $26 billion in their pocket, for the last 20-something years, they got $26 billion, and they grew no interest on it? It's been $26 billion for over 20 years. It hasn't grown a cent since. But they're collecting money on every month on people's pay bills and their electricity bills for nuclear. Which is, by the way, right across Canada, as far as I know, they're doing that. The whole story is absurd. It's not in the spirit of the compelling demonstration of willingness. No, because like we covered this a lot over the last number of years, right? Multiple times, many times a year, where they said the community has to welcome us in with a willingness. 51% of the votes is not a willingness. And for the mayor to come out and say, well, okay, we won. Now we got to move past it. We got to accept it. That's the lowest form of life conceivable that would do that to his own friends and families and community. He's doing it because the Nuclear Waste Management Organization can put a briefcase of money on his fake desk as the mayor, and nobody gets to know that existed. Because they got $26 billion, and they haven't grown a single cent of interest in over 20 years. How is that even possible? After they had $26 billion 22 years ago. So how come it's not $60 billion today? Where is that money going to? And we know they went into these communities and just threw money every year all over that community. Multi-million dollars a year in these little tiny communities. And the mayor's dad, who welcomed them in, and the mayor currently, you can be sure, reaped enormous benefits from all of that. And for him to come out and say, we got to accept it, time to move on, we won. Hurrah! This is why we should reinstate the death penalty in Canada for people just like that. Because he's going to poison everybody there forever. Every native community is going to be poisoned up there now forever. And we know how much the nuclear industry hates the native communities. The degenerate Nuclear Waste Management Organization plans to select a site this year where millions of bundles, 5.5 million bundles of used nuclear fuel. It's 5.5 billion bundles of reactor core fuel. Right? The way they frame the narrative will be placed in a network of underground rooms. It all melts down, though. That's the problem with this stuff. Once you leave it alone, it's going to melt down. It never stops producing heat. It's still splitting atoms. It produces heat by splitting atoms. The process for the $26 billion project has already been narrowed down to two sites, Ignis in Northern Ontario. I know I butchers the name, and South Bruce. My apologies. And the organization said both the local municipality and the First Nations in those areas will have to agree to be host. As long as it's 51%, that's good enough. We gotta move past it. It's time to heal the fractures. When I read that today, I really want to get in my truck and drive up to Ontario and grab him by his cheap $30 toy and pull him up real close and tell him what I thought of him. So, their evilness is so surreal. Their contempt for their communities and their friends and their families is surreal. I can't understand how it's not criminal. And Ignis, and I'm butchering the name, between Thunder Bay and Kenora, became the first community to make its decision known in July as the town council, not the population, but the town council, voted in favor of a nuclear waste repository at a special meeting. Like, hey, everybody get down to the office. We got to vote. It's payday, baby. Woo! Nuclear Waste Management Organization is there with suitcases of money for us. From the impoverished community. You really think they won't take the money? You really think these predators that done this won't take the money? And they done this because he said the community didn't want to have a referendum. Because the community was too stupid, like Slovenia, the first story we covered, to have a referendum. So they done it. And of course, they passed it. Purdy! Just the scum of humanity. Attention will now turn to the Wabigoon Lake Ojibway Nations. My apologies if I butcher anybody's names, and I will. The Saugeen Ojibway Nation, to see if they share the same willingness. This was a word that they introduced up there. Willing. You gotta want us there, or we're not gonna do it. Oh, we got 51%. It's time to move past everything now. Time to accept it. Woo-hoo. 51%. That's not willingness. That means you should have another referendum, doesn't it? And it should be a paper one, shouldn't it? Proponents of the project said it's a great opportunity for jobs and economic development. Oh, it's a great, yeah. You're going to ship nuclear waste that's vented all along the highway into your communities, is vented all the way in your communities, and then you're going to repackage it out in your farmland by your communities. You're going to contaminate everything there. All 7,000 lakes will be incredibly contaminated in just the first 4 or 5 years. Every one of them. And you're going to see heart and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's, dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome skyrocket over the following years. Because you let a handful of monsters in your little tiny community make a decision that was meant for you to make, not for them. And that all of Canada should have been in that referendum, not some little tiny communities. Bless their hearts, but they were compromised. South Bruce residents vote in favour of allowing an underground nuclear waste storage. The media was out just... Like, you can't put these pellets in your hand if they're gone through a chain reaction, so why are they showing you that? Right? To confuse the population, to misrepresent what's really going on. You can't even, if those pellets are in a little cup and went through a chain reaction, and you put them at McDonald's or whatever, and there's 200 people in there every 20 minutes, they all died every 20 minutes forever. Take the bodies out every 20 minutes, bring in another 200, and they'll all die if that was actually gone through a chain reaction. That's how toxic this stuff is, and it's done that because it's splitting atoms into an environment on top of that at a rate that is terrifying. The municipality of South Bruce held a referendum putting the questions to its residents, and the results released today show they voted 51% in favour. That's not a willingness. That's not a resounding yes. And it's a digital referendum with people that got $26 billion sitting there to compromise you. Where's your checks and balances? You left it in the hands of actual monsters, did you? The process for the $26 billion, which hasn't gained a single cent of interest in over 20 years. And the country's still paying into that bursary. Where's that money gone to for the last 20 years? It's been $26 billion for 20 years with no interest, and they're still charging the ratepayers every month for nuclear cleanup. Where's that money to? The lowest forms of life conceivable is always the pro-nuclear communities. It's already been narrowed down to 2 sites, one in Northern Ontario and South Bruce. And the organization said both the local municipalities and the First Nations in those areas will have to agree to be hosts. And I will be up there this spring. And I will be talking to every one of those communities. And we're going to scuttle your plan, buddy boy. You can censor the shit out of me all you want, but I'm going up there. I'm going to go knocking on doors in those native communities. And I'm going to make sure they know what you don't want them to know, you pieces of shit up there. The first community to make its own decision when they had a special, as the town council voted in favor, 100% in favor of a disease factory at a special meeting. How could you get any more eviler than that? Because they knew the community wasn't going to vote yes, right? And so the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, with $26 billion and no checks and balances, paid off these people at a special meeting. We need you to get down and have a vote. And attention now will turn to the Ojibway Nations in Northern Ontario to see if they share the same willingness What do you mean 51% is not a willingness? It's a robbery. It's genocide. That's all these people are good for. Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Canada wants to talk about its other nuclear waste problem with native communities. We do have a further mandate to find a solution for intermediate low-level waste, which compared to high-level waste is still lethal waste. Just because it's not fuel rods, it's still lethal waste, folks. So that is a new mandate that came forward around February this year. Phil, and this is Phil right here, Mrs. Demonic Demon herself. We do want to continue the willingness process. The willingness process. Are you willing to sell out all your friends and loved ones? If not, we're not going to have a referendum. We'll just get the town council to vote. The Ojibway Nation is now being targeted with nuclear waste again. Worldwide, we see this over and over and over. The native community. All you got to do is buy off a couple of the main players. A couple of suitcases of money. Now is irrelevant. But the interest they're making on $26 billion a year, they can say, I'll give you $1 million. But he says, no, okay, well, here's 10. You think he's going to say no then? You really think he's going to say no then? Cash. Here's 10 suitcases of money, cash. Nobody needs to know. You can take care of your family. You can live like kings. Oh, and we're going to throw another $10 million into your community every year until we get the vote. That's how they don't. That's how they done it, and that's how they're doing it. They really are the lowest forms of life, the pro-nuclear community. After all these years, we've never seen a redeeming quality in any one of them. Electors in South Bruce, which is Sun's traditional territory, and Sun's is the Saugeen Ojibway Nation. And I'm going to butcher the name. My apologies for doing that. I have a hard time sometimes with names that I'm not familiar with. But even if South Bruce has turned down the project, Nuclear Waste Management Organization has other projects to talk about with Sun, says scumbag Carolyn Phil. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization's regional communication manager for site selection. In an interview before South Bruce, results were known Monday. So they're going to target the native community for more nuclear waste. They're not evil at all, eh? Over and over and over, everywhere we look, this is what they do. It's hard to describe these people as humans, isn't it? Now the Nuclear Waste Management Organization has two choices where to put Deep Geological Repository. A site near Teewater in South Bruce and in Ignis Township in Northern Ontario, which is also voted for the project. Well, the Teewater didn't vote for it. The local idiot town council in a community of 2,000 people, they're the farthest things from educated on top of that. She acknowledged that the Suns had said it won't vote until next year, but that was early in the spring. And since turnout was above 50%, the results are binding for South Bruce. Are binding. That really sounds like a willingness, down at 51% for a digital vote. Not even a paper vote in a little community like that where everybody has access to the ballot, where you can have the local community count them and other people just verify them, and there's no debating then, right? What they done is despicable and criminal. And they should have another referendum in the community and be damned with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. They should just have their own vote and exclude the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. They know everybody in the community, and do the count and see what the real vote was. He said a news release would be coming later from the Ojibway Nations or South Bruce's vote. And their consent is required for the project to proceed. For both of them, right? Not just the so-called low level, which is still lethal, but the high level. So they're targeting the native communities is what they're doing. The project that was being discussed at that time involved a deep geological repository about 1.2 kilometers from the Great Lakes. So we voted heavily against it. Whenever the nuclear industry is involved, you need to have your own referendum at the same time in paper to see if they're going to rob you of your future and your health and your children's health. He noted the nuclear waste is produced in the traditional territories already stored in the Ojibway Nation's traditional territory as the Western Waste Management Facility near Bruce Nuclear Power Site, which is near the Great Lakes. It's not near it, it's right on the Great Lakes. And now Ontario has announced its interest in expanding nuclear power at Bruce Power Site by adding another 4.8 gigawatts of electricity generation in the next 10 years or 10 or more years. They can't build a nuclear reactor in 10 years for starters, and they can't build 4.8 gigawatts, 5 nuclear power plants in 10 years. And they say they're going to do small modular reactors. They don't have any applications into the regulatory agencies. And then you got Lake Huron, which is part of the Great Lakes, which is the third biggest aquifer on the entire planet. Why would you let the nuclear industry within 1,000 miles or something like that is beyond me. And all the nuclear power plants are built on the Great Lakes up there. All of Canada's are, and a lot of them Americans. I got a map here of it. So, oh me, oh my. Let me see here. I forgot what I was doing for a second. Now I might never find it. It should have been right there. Here it is. So this is the Great Lakes. Look at all the nuclear plants, nuclear dumps, nuclear fuel processing facilities on the Great Lakes. They're attacking your water. And your water is your life. Without water, decent water, we have no life on this planet. Without water, well, there is no life, right? ABS study concludes nuclear power is suitable for larger liquid natural gas carriers. Wait, are you going to put a nuclear reactor, liquid natural gas tanker ship? Oh my God, man. You guys are not maniacs at all. I thought it was really bad when they were talking about the regular big cargo ships, the big put it on a liquid natural gas, and then they got zero carbon lines. Some rare cases, man. There's no checks and balances, right? There is no checks and balances. Oh, that wasn't. I suppose I should have till the end of the show. That's me today. I went out and bought 2 large insulated tarps and a few other things. Because winter is here, man. We got to deal with it. I'm really happy to get my hands on the tarps, though. And they're not cheap, I'll tell you that. But I got them now, so I don't give a shit. That was so important to get my hands on those things. Bear with me here. I got distracted. That I didn't realize that. Okay, hang on. Let me show you something about these big ships, how bad these freaking things actually are. Here we go. Yeah, they've been at me all for 2 weeks now. Hacked the shit out of my computer. ABS study concludes nuclear power is suitable. Oh, that's not it. Come back over to the other screen here. Brutal censorship again tonight. Huge container ships' biggest problem is emissions. One massive container ship equals 50 million cars. So just one of these ships is equal to 50 million cars because they burn fuel that is supposed to be stored for hundreds of years till it breaks down, the bunker fuel. But they cut a deal to let these big ships go out on the ocean, the beautiful ocean, and these things are incredibly inefficient and contaminate the oceans with that stuff for decades. A single ship is equal to 50 million cars, and 15 of these ships is equal to all the cars on the planet. 15 of the biggest ships create more pollution than all the cars in the world. And then to put nuclear out there in the mix is absurd on top of that. It's absurd to use nuclear. And I'm sure this is just a AI picture that they created, zero carbon lines. But I blew up laughing when I seen that because the industry shocks me. Like, that's my response to the evilness. So if you take these big nuclear reactors and you're putting them on ships all over the place, you're going to have quite a few accidents in no time at all. That's for sure. We already got enough problems. We got minke whales starving to death, emaciated because they got leukemia from all the radioactive fallout. The minke whales, the North Atlantic right whales. We got the gray whale population just the last few years has dropped from 27,000 to 16,650, which means 10,350 have died that they acknowledge. And we've covered a lot of them, I can tell you that much, over the years, haven't we? Emaciated. That's the common theme, and all the whales are dying. They all have that one thing in common. The majority of them, you can see it in the pictures, they got peanut heads, and they got no blubber whatsoever. And they acknowledge the majority of them are emaciated on top of that. And then humpback whales. So you got 10,350 gray whales showed up emaciated. You got an extra 7,000 on top of the unusual mortality event showed up emaciated. Russia test fires missiles to simulate a massive response to the nuclear first strike. Yeah, but NATO just done a 2 week or a week and a half nuclear exercise not too far from Russia, which is 30 militaries, right? If you look up NATO, it says 30 militaries. And NATO was created in response to the Soviet Union, right? As a deterrent, so to speak. So once the Soviet Union was dissolved, and everybody's pensions and everything else was dissolved, and patents, shouldn't NATO been dissolved also? Because now NATO has aircraft carriers and nuclear weapons and fighter jets and armies and everything else. And a budget that is bigger than a lot of countries. And their only objective is war. Which, like, how do you think Ukraine made it this far? Because NATO, right? They're supplying the weapons, including idiot Canada, where I'm from. Russia test fires missiles to simulate a massive response to the nuclear first strike. So there's all kinds of media out there. The Russians are out there. But Jesus, NATO just done the same thing with 30 countries. They do it every year on top of that, and so does Russia, and so does America, and so does China, so does UK, so does everybody. But no, Russia's doing it, Dana. You're supposed to be scared shitless. NATO says it will not be intimidated by the Russians. Why should they be? They just spent a week and a half doing the exact same thing 2 weeks ago. Everybody got such a short memory, eh? Rolls-Royce sells a stake in their nuclear shift. Rolls-Royce is going to build small modular reactors, and UK gave them all kinds of millions and millions and millions of dollars. They wouldn't spend a cent of their own money, by the way, for the small modular reactors, right? And finally, they said that their small modular reactor is going to be around 400 to 500 megawatts, which is half a gigawatt, and which is actually the size of a lot of large nuclear power plants worldwide. So it's not even a small modular reactor, which they kept moving the goalpost on it, right? Originally, it was like 60 megawatts, 80 megawatts. Then he said it was like 150 megawatts. Then he said 200 megawatts. Then 300 megawatts. And they can't, after 80 years, if they haven't produced one now, they don't even have an application into the regulatory agency for any of the 100 companies that are with their own designs. After 80 years, you still don't have a design. And that the renewable, just in solar power, this year, 2024, is going to be 660 gigawatts, for goodness sakes. And this was a story James Lewis sent me last night. And I didn't see, because I was looking on my phone, right? I didn't see Geoff Brumfiel. When I see that today, I was like, wait a second. I got a folder on that guy. I'm going to show it to you tonight. That piece of shit, man. Geoff. What a disgusting maggot he turned out to be. I use a lot of colorful language tonight, I noticed. That's unusual for me. I'm all giddy because I got my tarps finally, maybe. Meet Americas, because with me it's all about work, right? And that's the stuff that'll make my life a lot better. Contamination area rate. I blew up laughing when I seen this picture. This is a secret in an aircraft hangar at a Joint Base Andrews, just outside of Washington, D.C. One of the government's most secretive groups gathered recently to celebrate its 50th anniversary. It's the most ludicrous assertion imaginable. It doesn't matter who you are, you can't do anything at a nuclear event. Though there were drinks and cakes and speeches right from the start, it was clear this was not an ordinary birthday party. It's hard not to hate these people for some reason, isn't it? Please note that this is an unclassified event, so please understand there's a lot of our people are not going to be able to discuss Christensen, which is an Icelandic name, isn't it? The director of the National Nuclear Security Administration's Office of Nuclear Incidents Response told a small crowd sitting in a folding chair. I'm pretty sure Geoff was invited to that one, was it? That's Geoff right here, by the way. The group is known as the Nuclear Emergency Support Team, NEST. NEST. They love their acronyms, don't they? It's made primarily of people who work elsewhere in the government, scientists, federal law enforcement personnel, regulators, non-regulators actually, aren't they? Who all take the time out of their day jobs to prepare for a nuclear incident. Really? That's one of them right there. Look. Think of it as a volunteer fire department. Why would you think of it that way? You're talking about radiation, stupid. Oh, that's right. It's Geoff telling the story. Except the volunteers have high-level security clearance and they respond to nuclear threats. Ha ha. NEST has always kept a low profile because almost everything it does related to nuclear weapons and nuclear terrorism is classified. And because it doesn't want to alarm people. Like when you meet them, you become alarmed immediately, don't you? Because it doesn't want to alarm people. Well, We are always ready 24/7. Like, if there's a nuclear incident, you can't do nothing. It's nuclear, stupid. We're always prepared to deploy, said Wendell Smith, the Deputy Undersecretary of the Counterterrorism. Like, they got to have these in order to demonize you, see? And counterproliferation at the Department of Energy, which runs NEST. Department of Energy, which runs NEST. She hopes talking more openly about the mission might help people feel more assured, as well as deter adversaries who may be out to cause nuclear mayhem. Well, the only people causing nuclear mayhem is the nuclear industry. But they're the worst thing that ever happened to our planet is the nuclear industry. In fact, if the nuclear industry didn't exist, we'd have all kinds of bees and birds and whales wouldn't be emaciated. The birds wouldn't be dead and emaciated. There'd be incredible diversity of species instead of literally almost none. And that we all be healthy. There wouldn't be cancer. The cancer epidemic happened in the 70s, you know, when the nuclear testing had already contaminated the entire planet. And they haven't slowed down since. And every reactor fuel pool is hemorrhaging radiation into the environment because of splitting atoms. The history of the team sounds like it belongs in a spy thriller. Now, you got to understand who Geoff Brumfiel actually is. He's one of the lowest forms of life you're ever going to come across. And after this story is over, I'm going to introduce you to some of his nonsense. Well, his lethal nonsense. It all began in 1974 when a person going by the name of Captain Midnight, which is most likely a spook operation, right, threatened to set off a nuclear bomb somewhere in Boston unless they paid $200,000, which is equal to $1.3 million today, right? So it sounds like a PSYOP, a false flag, right? And this is how it was created. The crisis ended when the FBI left a bag containing phony bills at a ransom spot, but nobody came, and the incident was deemed a hoax, or a PSYOP was more like it. According to a 2009 book, Defusing Armageddon, which details the history of the useless NEST group. According to the 2009 book, then President Gerald Ford was appalled, and 6 months later the government created NEST to aid in the response to a lost or stolen nuclear weapons, a broken arrow, and special nuclear material, nuclear bomb threats, and radiation dispersal threats. How are you going to do that when it's so lethal, right? You can't. The average person has no way of accessing it. The only people who can access that material is the government themselves. I don't have access to it. I've been involved with nuclear for over 22 years. I don't have access to anything that can create a dirty bomb, right? You don't. And you can take a billion pounds of bananas and you can't make a dirty bomb out of it, okay? You can take 2 billion pounds of potato chips, you can't make a dirty bomb out of it. So then the question is, why do they say it's like a banana and a potato chip? Because that's their way of telling you you're an idiot. That's their way of calling you an idiot without coming out and saying it. In 1978, NEST deployed in Canada's remote Northwest Territory to recover debris from a crashed Soviet reconnaissance satellite that was powered by uranium. So people get lost in that statement right there, right? They don't give a shit about the uranium. They were there to get their technology from the Soviet Union, which was choosing them, right? The uranium is probably still there on the ground. There's no way they're going to pick that up and bring it back. A year later, NEST helicopters circle over 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant after one of the plant's reactors' partial meltdown. It's interesting how they always got to inject that there. They can't just say meltdown. Partial meltdown. It was worse than a partial meltdown, wasn't it? I'll show you something. At the time, little was known about how much radiation had leaked from the plant, and it was NEST who helped collect the necessary data to guide the evacuation orders. Dick Thornburg was the new governor at the time, He refused to evacuate the women and the children for 3 days, which is 3 days way too late, isn't it? And how was NIST going to collect the data without getting incredibly contaminated in their helicopter? CBC on 3 Mile Island reports of enormous increases in cancer. In fact, there's cancer maps that showed up from studies done by local universities years later. Infant mortality rates doubles, birds disappeared, many mutations observed. People came home after evacuating. They evacuated way too late. They left their pets behind. They come home to their pets with their eyes burned out. And they went, because they believed NIST and the rest of them, went back in their homes and continued to live there. A lot of these people were transients, right? So we'll never know the true damage. But to call this industry revolting and parasitic wouldn't be untrue at all. In 2011, NIST experts and equipment flew to Fukushima, Japan. It's so stupid. After a nuclear power plant there melted down. It was 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools that melted down. It wasn't a reactor that melted down. It was 4 of them and 8 fuel pools. And spewed a plume of radioactivity across the countryside. It covered the entire planet. I'll show you something coming up. The mission was to help the Japanese government understand what is being released from the damaged reactors, says Geoff, who we got some stories coming up that he put out back then. And where is that plume going? Where it is deposited on the ground, said Jay Tilden, the Department of Energy's head of intelligence and counterintelligence, who until recently ran NIST. In the first year, there was 865,000 extra cancers in Japan in the first year. Do you really think NIST went close to all these nuclear meltdowns? Does anybody really believe NIST went near these creatures when nobody else did? There was 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Not everybody got health care. Not everybody was diagnosed. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. You can go read this story from 2016. 30 million tons of radioactive waste. And then they also talk about the bags deteriorate after 3 years, meaning the bags, the waste, not the waste, but the nuclear waste, has to be repackaged. How do you repackage nuclear waste, see? In one-ton bags that are not able to contain the radiation or the gamma shines or x-rays or neutrons or beta rays or alpha or like they're growing food right alongside of the one-ton bags. What did NIST do to stop that? Anybody? Does anybody know what NIST done to stop that? What these worthless humans, subhuman things done to stop this? Nothing. And they learned how to evaluate other terrorist threats, for example, using nuclear material to make a so-called dirty bomb. Well, who's going to get their hands on nuclear material? Oh, that's right, the government. So everybody who's eating this food ate a dirty bomb, didn't they? Every one of those one-ton bags are a dirty bomb. That's 30 million one-ton dirty bombs. They're now cutting them open and growing food in the soil, by the way. Did NIST go down and stop this? Seniors urged to eat the radioactive rice to help the farmers and protect the young people from getting radiation sickness and dying. This is the Japan Times, the government media, which also posted the telephone number and the fax numbers to order the radioactive rice. Seniors urged to eat the deadly food so that the farmers can keep murdering everybody. Like, there's such a disconnect in that statement, in that headline, and that story. I'm ashamed of everybody that is proud to be in the nuclear industry. They should be humiliated that they're part of that industry. NIST doesn't want to be seen as a shadowy government agency flying around in black helicopters. In fact, when the group purchased new helicopters a few years ago, they explicitly avoided the color. These really are the most worthless humans imaginable, these people. Out to hoodwink the population as if they're some kind of hero or something. There are folks like Jacqueline Brandon. We got a picture of her father, actually. That's her father right there. Her job is to sit in the back of a helicopter scanning for signs of radioactivity as the helicopter flies low to the ground. They didn't fly low to the ground here. Did Nest tell these people to do what they done? To hide what happened, I wonder? Were they involved in that decision to pretend that they were in the fuel pools on top of the building that didn't exist? She said, to me, it's like a roller coaster ride. I love it, I love it, I love it. She's airborne a lot. This year alone, Nest aircraft have flown above the Super Bowl, the Boston Marathon, and both the Democratic and Republican national conventions. These are the fearmongers from the nuclear industry, right? To scare everybody. Even when there's no Pacific threat. She's like, so special. We don't provide the details, but it would say on a weekly basis there's either an unknown event that triggers the deployment of the Nest team or a question from a local responder, she says. I would, like, she's got a great education, but she's got the common sense of a fruit fly. She said, in fact, somebody with radioactive dye in their body caused a recent Nest response. This is a really interesting story. I'm sure it's not true, by the way. A team was called out after local police found a radioactive puddle in a fast food parking lot somewhere in America. Jesus Christ. That's the strangest story. So how did the police find a radioactive puddle? Did they go around the fast food chains looking for radioactive puddles? And what they're saying is somebody took a piss around a fast food joint and left a puddle of water that was radioactive. That's what they're talking about, see? Jeff. See, people like this is why I always say the pro-nuclear community, when they join the nuclear industry, they should be sterilized immediately because they might have kids. And they might be working at this too. A team called out after local police found a radioactive puddle in a fast food parking lot somewhere in America. Does anybody really believe that story is... That's a real story? When I was reading that today, I blew up laughing. I was like, oh my God. Like, how can you not have a radioactive puddle everywhere on this planet after Fukushima? This is a study of 10 million atoms of cesium-137. This model, by the way, at this point right here is 20 days. That's 20 days of radioactive fallout. This is the French government showing 10 million atoms of just cesium-137, which pulses energy 600 feet. So every puddle is radioactive, period, on this planet. And Nest cannot fly anywhere without their Geiger counter screaming. Meet America's Secret First Responders by Geoff Brumfiel. I was like, wait a second, I got a whole folder on that disgusting parasite. Directly comparing Fukushima to Chernobyl. And this is the 7th of September, 2011. Fukushima happened March 11th. So April, May, June, July, August, September. 6 months later. So 6 months later, they knew the reactors were gone. Not Jeff, though. Zoom out to view Chernobyl radiation over Fukushima. So you see the model of Fukushima over there. He really is a scumbag, isn't he, Geoff Brumfiel? So this is Fukushima's radiation, they said. Look, that little tiny spot right there. And this is Chernobyl's. You got to be an exceptional scumbag to write stories like that, by the way. 6 months after it. In Fukushima, by the way, it was 1.4 million atoms, which is catastrophic numbers. in the worm feces 60 kilometers from the meltdown, but the whole prefecture. Every organism in Fukushima prefecture is contaminated with radiation. Every organism. Hello, Don Vincent.
Hello, Mr. Diner. How are you? Yeah, filthy scammer.
What the hell was that? That was Calm Down Charlie. I put in the wrong number. Did he send me a text message? Guess I accidentally put in Don's number. Sorry, Don. I'll fix that. 1.4 million atoms a kilogram in the entire prefecture of Fukushima. And by the way, the guy who called in, you'll hear a song about him at the end of the show, Calm Down Charlie. We call him Calm Down Charlie because he's been stalking us for over 10 years. He's with Japan. He's like a pet troll that is very dangerous, unfortunately. The total estimate delivered to the International Atomic Energy Agency in June stated that Fukushima has released 1.5 times 10 to the power of 16 becquerels of cesium-137, which is about a fifth of the cesium-137 from Chernobyl. So they're saying Fukushima is currently estimated 5.5% of Chernobyl 6 months later. Just bear with me here. Bring up some more pictures. Well, we'll get the pictures coming up, but I want to put one more picture in there. Like it's unconscionable to suggest here we go. This is the stump of reactor 4, the stump of reactor 3, and that there was reactor 1 and reactor 2 also 100% meltdowns. And that at the top of these buildings was 2 fuel pools with 40 years of reactor cores. So let's put, say, 8 reactor cores at the top of each of these buildings. Say 6 million pounds per building. They're gone. And radiation experts terrified how the Pacific ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. Plutonium and uranium suspected. Suspected of, just bear with me here for a second. It kind of shocked me because I thought it was Don Vincent. I accidentally put, because it's my new phone, I have to do everything by hand, right? I'm not going to use my memory card and put it into my new phone. It's terrifying how the Pacific ecosystem has collapsed since Fukushima. Now, we know that because we went out and done 6 years of research expeditions for 4 to 5 months a year, doing species counts. How plutonium and uranium suspected of spreading through the food chain. So this is a plutonium-239 dispersal covering the entire planet. This is based on 20 days. So Geoff Brumfiel would have known clearly that this model existed. And this is another thing I hate about Geoff and people like Geoff. It's hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to irradiated school playgrounds with Geiger counters strapped to their chest. They were dosimeters. You couldn't read them. You have to send them away to the university. They read them, right? And they were just using children for human guinea pigs. There was 95,000 children that they gave dosimeters to so they can study them like lab rats in a nuclear wasteland. It's really, really spectacular, the evilness of this industry. The first thing that you see is that Chernobyl is indeed quite a bit bigger. This is Geoff Geoff Brumfiel. In fact, the permanent exclusion zone red encompasses most of the Fukushima fallout map. So they're saying Fukushima's that one over there is a little tiny spot, whereas Chernobyl covered large sections, right? But see, each of these reactors are 100 Chernobyls, because Chernobyl was a new reactor, was a small reactor. It didn't have any fuel pools at the top of the buildings, and it was graphite, not pure uranium, pure plutonium, like these large reactors were. These were 190-foot, 19-story, 65-meter buildings. And so that's 9 reactor cores are gone, and 9 reactor cores, and there was 2 more buildings with the same attributes. If Fukushima had been a Chernobyl scale crisis, it's at least 400 or 4,000 Chernobyls. Each of the reactors were equal to about 100 Chernobyls because they're pure uranium, pure plutonium. There was 9 reactor cores in each building. And the reason they have so much there is because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan. The radioactive fallout, one of the studies was showing 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 per liter. That's 220 million counts per minute or a second, who knows for sure, for 150 million years. Directly comparing Fukushima to Chernobyl, Geoff Brumfiel, category Fukushima. This is the September the 7th. What a worm to do what he done, though, eh? What an incredible worm to do. Now, clearly TEPCO paid him, right? Clearly the Japanese government, rather, paid him. And that's why we had Calm Down Charlie call us. He's one of their little pet monkeys, no doubt. September 11th, this Sunday, the 11th of September, marked the 6-month anniversary of the triple meltdown. It was 4 meltdowns and 8 fuel pools that melted down. And the accident has slipped from the headlines, but new data are coming out all the time. Some of the most recent findings are allowing the best comparison yet of Fukushima and Chernobyl. And again, they're showing you these models. I'm horrified that people can be that evil, and that there's so many of them, and that they hate you and us and every species so much. I mean, my goodness, it's astounding the contempt and hatred that they have for us, isn't it? Just bear with me here. I'm just... tomorrow is Halloween, so I'm not sure if I'm doing a show tomorrow night. It's just too much activity going on. I'm probably going to do a show, mind you. Don't count me out. But there's a possibility I won't be doing a show tomorrow night. Just bear with me one more moment. I don't know why it's so hard to do sometimes it's very difficult to find the material. Well, we've had a few issues this week for sure, right? This is another model of the xenon based on 20 days. 133 covering the majority of the planet. Give it another 20 days and it's covering the planet. A lot of the media outlets, ourselves included, said Geoff Brumfiel, first made the Fukushima-Chernobyl comparison back in April, when the Japanese revised their estimate of the Fukushima accident, rating it as a 7 on the 7-point international scale. The conclusion most reached at the time was that although the rating was the same, Fukushima was a much smaller. Fukushima wasn't. 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter. This was out of British Columbia, Canada. Fell on the U.S. post-Fukushima. This is catastrophic numbers, by the way. He said the first thing you can see is Chernobyl is indeed quite a bit bigger. No, Chernobyl is nothing. It is brutal, though. Chernobyl was brutal. But it's nothing compared to Japan. It's literally like a paper towel in the comparison of Japan. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. So, like, they're talking about the entire population of the planet getting sick. And the reason they're doing it is because they know. Geoff says, the Fukushima fallout is notable for what it doesn't contain. And they actually show you a picture of reactor 3, look. He says, some very nasty contaminants like strontium-90 and americium-241. By the way, the biggest emissions from a nuclear meltdown, or even from the fuel, is the curium isotopes. That's why almost every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. And the curium, which is an alpha emitter, brutal at that, is you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium, for goodness sakes. And then all the other isotopes are going to be in the same plume, right? So if you got an neptunium-239 plume, then you clearly got a, which decays to plutonium, by the way. You got a plutonium-238 eventually, but they also got a plutonium-239 plume. I showed you that earlier. And various plutonium isotopes are all absent in any significant quality because the concrete vessels around the reactors stayed intact. I don't know, let's have a look at them. The reactors were at the top of the building with the fuel pools. Wait a second, there's no top to the building, Geoff. So when you look at these buildings, how can, now this was original footage, how can Geoff make those assertions? And how can he pretend that he's a human too is an interesting question. Reactor 2 completely lost its entire inventory. Remember, the tsunami went right through the site. And a large chunk of that country. Reactor 4 was almost level to the ground. They built this contraption. It went twice as high as this. It doesn't physically touch Reactor 4. It extends over it. They put panels on it and then claimed that they were inside the building. So you can see the discrepancy of the height of this building to the stump lift. Then they claimed they were in the building looking down on the fuel pool, which was at the top of the building. Reactor 1 lost its entire inventories too. And the explosions, you can find them online. So that's what they done with Reactor 4. They built this contraption up and over it, and then they pretended that they were in it. December 19, 2014, at the Fukushima Daiichi, at the Unit 4 operating floor. So he's claiming he's at the operating floor at the very top of that building over there. That doesn't exist. On top of a nuclear meltdown. I mean, this is a, you know, they're on the seaside of the pump house, and they're spraying a reagent towards the reactor itself. This is the homeless and the dead. These people would have died that day. They were in paper suits, spraying a reagent to stop the pellets from splitting atoms into the local environment. So these were considered disposable people. And various plutonium isotopes, he said, are absent in any significant quality because the concrete vessels and the reactors apparently were intact. In Chernobyl, the explosion and subsequent fire spewed these extremely dangerous isotopes far and wide. Really? So, like, this picture was available on the 6th day by March 17, 2011. And Geoff is saying that never happened. Fukushima's heavy containment vessels limit the spread of some dangerous isotopes. What containment? What are you talking about? The problem is that there's so many worthless people. There's so many worthless people. I screwed that up, eh? Hang on a second. Almost everybody in the nuclear industry that we come across, right, as mentioned publicly, are worthless. The latest map suggests there are permanent exclusion zone to the northwest of Fukushima, but will likely be quite a bit smaller than that Chernobyl. Like, this is a Medusa. This is a mixed oxide, a plutonium mixed oxide that Geoff had access to those pictures like everybody else, and he's saying that never happened and that there's hardly any radioactive fallout. And he's still out there today stabbing everybody in the back all these years later. He said, for a quick update on what's been happening at Fukushima, check out our latest video. Shows you these pictures. These types of pictures. Like, because the average person can't comprehend what they're looking at, right? They don't understand that's reactor 4, that's reactor 3. And that they're completely, these are skyscrapers that are destroyed, and that the reactor cores are at the top of the buildings. Wearing paper suits at a nuclear meltdown. These filters are 600 times bigger than the atoms that they're trying to filter. You can't filter it. Spraying regions on reactor 2. Like this. The stupidest. And so they're suggesting that it's only this little area to show you the victims that'll never go back, lost their entire life. Not Geoff, though. He made a big payday while everybody else lost their legacy, their families, their pets, and everything else forever. Geoff made a big payday. That's all that mattered, right? Geoff the Monster. That's what his family should call him. They built this contraption off-site to put around reactor 1. You can see a person standing there. And this is 4 times higher than... There's 4 more pieces got to go on top of that to get to the top of the building of reactor 1. This was a Kevlar sarcophagus they were putting around it. Footage courtesy of the International Atomic Energy and TEPCO, not Geoff. Narration and reporting by scumbag Geoff Brumfiel, the morons and Jeff Marsh. This is them there, look. Fukushima's like eating a banana, waggling in the sunshine, and flying on an airplane. And then the comments section below was really interesting. Respect to those still following, refusing to ignore the nuclear dilemma. I can almost feel the hate already from future generations of humans on the Earth. It was one of the few commenters, a couple of them, that were honest, right? The World Health Organization calculations are consistent with several health surveys conducted by the Japanese scientists, which found civilian doses at or below 1 to 115 millisievert range, even among people living near the plant. Compare this to 10 to 12 millisieverts per year from living in Boulder, Colorado. Like, it's got anthropogenic and man-made, or natural and anthropogenic man-made are completely different. One you're already acclimated to through genetic superior selection. The other one destroys your body, your immune system, and everything else. Like, these are other journalists like Geoff that are pretending they're on top of a building that don't exist. The worst humans conceivable. Somebody else had a pains of conscience. Nice downplay of the horrible this disaster really is, guys. Great job. Another one says, well-made, unbiased report, which is most likely Geoff. Meanwhile, the ocean is dying. All the whales are emaciated, thanks to Fukushima's pulse event. Totally downplayed as instructed by the authorities, I'm sure. Sickening, isn't it? The people responsible should be held accountable, strongly held accountable. I can't believe it has come to this. Yeah, the people who are downplaying it should be held accountable. Well said. The other scumbag says, the amount of radiation released from the nuclear meltdowns is actually less than what the average coal-fired plant puts out in its lifetime. Like, you're talking about radon, basically, right? And to equate that with curium and americium, neptunium, and strontium, and plutonium, and all the other hideous isotopes, right? That most likely Geoff wrote that. For a quick update on what's been happening at Fukushima, check out our latest video. It wasn't his video, it was the International Atomic Energy Agency, allegedly. The thing about this statement here is Japan Times column is the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time. The truth will come out about Fukushima. Geoff Brumfiel, NPR, National Public Radio. He got a nice cushy job, didn't he, by being a piece of shit? By being a scumbag. All you got to do is cut everybody's throat and he gets a good job. Works as a senior editor or correspondent in the Nuclear Public Radio's science desk. His editing duties include science and space, while his reporting focuses on the intersection of science and national security. He's the very first one to cut your throat when there's something happening. He's carried his microphones into the ghost villages created by the Fukushima. And before NPR, he was based in London as a... figures, don't it? There's so many scumbags from the media from London. It's unbelievable. He was the Nature's Magazine Washington correspondent from 2002 to 2007. His whole life is as a predator. Jeff the Monster. Right, all his friends thinks he's a good person. Thinks he's really, he's a successful businessman. He works for the big media, and he's actually a real life monster. Hired only because he's a real life monster. He only gets the job because he's a monster. That's why he got that job. It's because he's an actual monster, and he's a coward too, right? It's the most cowardly thing to do is what he does. It's truly the most cowardly thing. Tokyo Vice Governor, all of Japan, the Vice Governor suggests a Fukushima draft. 60 and older should be prepared to die. It should be every journalist should be prepared to die when there's a nuclear meltdown. Just get rid of them. I went in today and picked up 8 by 24 foot insulated tarps. These are really good tarps. These are going to make a big difference for the winter for me, for the shed and for the equipment. So I'm super happy with that. And we got some more chocks for the wheels. I don't have enough. And my trailer slipped yesterday. I almost took out my kneecap, so I got more wheel chocks. I was so lucky to get away with that one. And I had to get windshield wipers. Mine are shot, tattered, ragged. And so James Lucid donated $270 last night. My goodness. I made that possible. Thank you so much, James. My goodness. I'm so thrilled to get my hands on that equipment, man. It's just a lifesaver for me. Alrighty, so we made it through tonight's show. Lord only knows how. What time is it? I haven't checked the time. Not bad. Hour and 48 minutes in. We've been struggling since yesterday, since they screwed me. Had to reload everything. It's been a friggin' disaster. We got to close the poll down, I guess, next. Would humanity be healthier if the nuclear industry never contaminated all of our food and water? I'm surprised the trolls didn't show up. Imagine doing a show for a decade and you get 18 people on your show. How many people would have quit a long time ago? I don't have an option of quitting because there's nobody here to replace us. We got to show up. We got no options. We got to do what we can do. And next year, I'm headed up to Ontario to inform the natives about the Deep Geological Repository. And I'm going to knock on every door in those communities if I got to. We are going to bring the fight to them. And then we're going to make them fight back against this disgusting industry that wants to destroy their health and their future and their land and the fresh water of this planet. Yeah. Alrighty. I'm exhausted. It was a good day though. We got all of our tarps, so I'm unbelievably happy about that. Hi everybody. Good night everybody. Hugs for everybody. See everybody on the next show. Have a great day. Wait now, hang on a second here. We got... Must be Jeff showed up by the looks of it. You need to be in a psychiatric hospital. Really? Because I showed you the documentation? You think these people don't need to be in a psychiatric hospital and a psychiatrist putting a drip into their arm 24 hours a day? But calling you scumbags means I'm a bad person, does it? And you could have called in, you piece of shit, but you didn't, did you? You worthless sack of shit. Call in and insult me when most likely that's Jeff, right? And that's why Shit for Brains called us earlier, right? Calm down, Charlie. You people need to be arrested and held accountable for crimes against humanity that you've created, man. It's unbelievable that people like that exist, isn't it? We'll see everybody on the next show. You have a great night, a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. We're going to close it off with James Lucett's song about Calm Down Charlie, who called in and tried to interfere again in the show. You have a great night. We'll see everybody. I'm not sure if I'm doing a show tomorrow night or not. It's hard to say because tomorrow's Halloween and it creates a lot of problems. Trying to do a show during that. I might do it. Who knows? We'll see tomorrow night anyway. Take care, folks. Have a great night.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford's show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.